Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Rose and Ray, for hosting this event, and thank you, all of you, for coming. I want to give you a little bit of a sense of not only the range of work that the GLAAD attorneys do, but even for some of you who've known GLAAD for a long time, a little better sense of who the people are back at the office who are doing all of this work. Now, GLAAD lawyers are actually, many of us, very superstitious people. If I'm arguing a big case, Monday is my lucky day. Mary Benato's lucky day to file a new case is actually Tuesday. I don't know what day the Dolan case was filed. And sometimes our superstition is about a number. Mary has this deep belief in the number 3. 3 points, 3 parts to an argument. And lately, as you all probably know, we've been thinking a lot about the number 9. Especially doing the math 5 plus 4. Now before I tell you and get back to talking about what's going on with these 9, I want to give you a little better sense of our GLAAD team of 9. One of the things that makes me so proud to be a GLAAD lawyer is that in addition to doing big precedent-setting cases that have really changed the lives of LGBT people and people with HIV throughout the country, we have all, as lawyers, remained deeply rooted in our community, helping people who are facing a range of obstacles that's not going to become a civil rights lawsuit, advising lawyers who call us when they have an issue on the ground, and working on a range of policy and legal issues that you might not know about. So here are our 9. Karen Lowy. Karen recently successfully advocated for Rhode Island woman Deb Tavia, who was married in Massachusetts, but whose spouse died of lung cancer, and the death certificate in Rhode Island listed them as never married. And until Karen got involved, Deb could not even get title to their car because the DMV would not recognize their marriage and transfer title. Vicki Henry, who's here in the back. Vicki is doing a lot of our youth work these days, a new initiative where we're trying to really focus on youth work. And one of the things Vicki did recently, see her here at one of our workshops, Vicki consulted with a teacher in Maine about how to empower high school students in a gay-straight alliance who were being harassed on an internet site, including phrases like dirty lesbians and so forth. It was not a school-based site, so it was a challenge to come up with ways these students could respond to that harassment. Here is our Jansen Wu looking festive and fabulous at Gay Pride. And he is there converted to GLAAD attorney. One of the things Jansen did recently is get the American Medical Association to pass a resolution supporting transition-related health care for transgender people, something that we're fighting for in the courts and in legislatures, and it's incredibly important to have medical associations back us in this effort. There's our Mary Benato, and Mary's done so many things, but among them, she has helped so many gay and lesbian parents navigate the sometimes uncertain terrain of establishing a legal relationship with their children. And most recently, Mary was very involved in advising attorneys who had such a case in Maine that went up to Maine's highest court, and also wrote a friend of court brief, an amicus brief, ruling that the lower courts, the probate and family courts in Maine, did have the authority to determine who a child's parents are when that child is born or conceived through procedures like IVF. There I am, standing behind our governor at a bill signing, and one of the things in my HIV work at GLAAD that I hear a lot today is that there's no longer stigma associated with HIV, that is now a thing of the past. I can tell you that's not the case, and this really was dramatized for me recently when I began working with a woman who lives on the South Shore of Massachusetts. And I can tell you, on the South Shore, HIV is largely underground because people fear rejection. And this is a woman who's 60 years old. She was diagnosed in 1985, and she had her HIV status disclosed illegally by the same hospital twice, 17 years apart. So that tells us we still have a lot of basic work and education to do. There's Gary Busick, waving his hand at Gay Pride March. And those of you who know Gary know that he is a brilliant lawyer and does so much that people don't know about. And I'll give you just one thing that he has become expert in, and that is really focusing on legal approaches to religious-based discrimination against LGBT people, which is becoming an increasing issue that we need to grapple with. This is Allison Wright in the center, GLAAD's newest lawyer who just started with us in April, and she has jumped right in to our youth work. We're doing a number of Got Rights workshops for LGBT youth that we're doing with Bagley to educate youth about their rights and enable them to advocate for themselves in schools and other settings. There is our leader, Executive Director Lee Swislow. Anybody who can hike the entire Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine is a pretty amazing person. And Lee has so many skills that she brings to GLAAD, both internally and in the community. And one of her, and there she is, finishing the trail on top of Mount Katahdin. One of the great skills that Lee has is that she is an amazing facilitator in coalitions. And anybody who's ever worked in a coalition knows that they can fall apart with bickering and disagreements. And Lee has this great skill, which she has been using to facilitate the coalition of groups working to win marriage at the ballot box in Maine this fall. And that's a really critical role. And finally, our Transgender Rights Project Director, Jennifer Levi. Jennifer and I have actually been litigating a case on behalf of a fifth grade transgender girl who was excluded from the girls' restroom and also bullied in school. But one of the things Jennifer has been doing recently, and she is always finding this groundbreaking work to do, is that she has actually been working with families of very young children with cross-gender identification and working with schools to ensure sound and appropriate policies and treatment for these students in school as young as kindergarten. And that's an emerging area that we're going to see as we continue to do more work on transgender law. The other thing I really want to give Jennifer lots of kudos for is that this year she and Robeson Gray associate Liz Mullen-Browder had an extraordinary achievement by publishing this book on transgender family law, A Guide to Effective Advocacy and Treatment, which Robbie is selling in the back. And you can also get it on your iPad, iPhone, Kindle, and all these other things. And this is the first book in the country giving lawyers practical tips on the unique needs and concerns that transgender people face in the family law context. So it's really something we are so proud of at GLAAD. So that is our GLAAD 9, which brings me back to the 9 who work here. Isn't that a great building? Now, as most of you know, just a few weeks ago in the Gill case, our case became the first appellate decision in the country to rule, as the court stated, that Congress's denial of federal benefits to same-sex couples who are legally married has not been adequately supported by any permissible federal interest. And with those words, put us on a path to this building. Now, even though GLAAD is a relatively small organization, GLAAD is no stranger to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1995, GLAAD's founder, John Ward, became the first openly gay man to argue before our highest court in the St. Patrick's Day Parade case. Although we lost that case has now been recognized and appreciated as the first decision in which the court discussed LGBT issues in a respectful tone, and really, therefore, has been seen as a precursor to some of the transformative decisions on LGBT rights that follow. In 1998, I'll explain this photo in a minute. In 1998, I argued for the U.S. Supreme Court Bragdon v. Abbott, which had to do with a dentist in Bangor, Maine, who refused to treat people with HIV. And the U.S. Supreme Court took the case to decide whether people with HIV were protected from the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, the reason I'm showing you this photo is that the arguing before the court is always something that is just on a different stratosphere than any other legal experience a lawyer can have. And it was really a surreal experience for me that on the day of argument combined both a nerve-wracking experience being questioned by 9 Supreme Court judges, but also sort of felt like the bar mitzvah I never had as a 13-year-old. My entire family came down for the argument. Here are my nephews who probably had no idea what was going on. And then, of course, for the occasion, my mother had to buy me a new suit, which I'm sporting here. The Bragdon case, I mean, it was a fascinating experience, and I will tell you, it was where I learned the most important strategy and technique of appellate experience, which I have passed on to all the GLAAD lawyers who have told me they have appreciated it and have even relied upon it. And that is, our legal director, Gary Busick, before oral argument, as I was getting more and more and more stressed, said, Ben, I was trying to calm down, you don't win your case at oral argument. And I kind of knew that. Everybody knows it really is the briefs and the justices tangling with each other. But he said, then he added, well, you know, you can lose your case because you can make a concession that tanks the case. So in the weeks ahead, preparing for argument before the U.S. Supreme Court in this case, I lived in constant terror that I would be the lawyer who was boxed into a corner by Justices Scalia or Rehnquist, and therefore made the fatal concession that ruined the Americans with Disabilities Act for all people with HIV throughout the United States. But I had an out, because I decided, and this is absolutely what was going through my mind at the time, I decided that if I was standing before the 9 U.S. Supreme Court justices and I was boxed into a corner and had nowhere else to go but to make that concession, that I would pass out. Honestly, and I have shared this with GLAAD attorneys who have utilized this and taken great comfort in this appellate strategy. Fortunately, I did not have to rely on such a drastic means. But that brings us to the next GLAAD case, which may well come before the High Court. And here are our DOMA plaintiffs. And as you know, we represent 8 married couples and 3 surviving spouses who were denied federal protections that would be given to heterosexual married couples and were denied to these plaintiffs. And I wish that you all could have seen Mary argue this case in federal appeals court in March, where she eloquently set forth our case for equal protection, which has as its core the fact that we have a 230-year tradition in this country of deference by the federal government to marital status determinations by the states. And there's been only one exception, and that is for gay and lesbian couples. Now, we don't know whether the U.S. Supreme Court is going to take this case. It is in some ways out of our control, the decision having been issued in our favor by the Court of Appeals. But the experts tell us that the Supreme Court always takes a case where a federal statute has been ruled unconstitutional. And we even have some intelligence that BLAG, as it's called, bipartisan legal advisory group that is basically the House Republicans now controlling the case after the Obama administration refused to defend the law, that they will file a petition fairly quickly. So on the first Monday in October, when the Supreme Court meets after issuing its final decisions in the next couple of weeks, we should know whether GLAAD will once again be off to the races in the United States Supreme Court. And I want to leave you, there's our DOMA team, Vicki, Mary, Jansen, and Gary. They have done a terrific job in winning this case thus far. I want to leave you with this picture. On the left is Herb Burtis, who's one of our plaintiffs in the case. He was together with John to his right for 60 years. And they married in Massachusetts, and Herb took care of John as he battled Parkinson's and finally succumbed to that disease in August of 2008. But because of DOMA, we know that Herb does not get the same Social Security survivor benefits from our government that he would if he were in a heterosexual marriage. So my hope and my optimism is that when we gather again next June, we will have a decision in the DOMA case vindicating Herb and John's relationship. Thank you so much for coming, for supporting GLAAD, for enabling us to do this full range of work.